Of course. Here is the script, paraphrased to slightly alter the word order while meticulously preserving its original articulate and suspenseful style. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Somewhere in the forgotten archives of a Charleston courthouse, buried beneath decades of water damage and neglect, lies a birth certificate that should not exist. Dated March 1847, the document records the delivery of a child to a woman named Celia. But every known principle of human gestation is contradicted by the physician's notes, which contain measurements and observations. With any medical understanding of pregnancy, then or now, the numbers do not align. In 1849, the Charleston Medical Society quietly sealed the related documents. Within 18 months, the 3 physicians involved in the case had left the state, never to practice medicine again. For over a century and a half, the descendants of those who witnessed what happened have passed down only warnings to leave Celia's story alone, refusing to discuss the details. Tonight, we are examining the documented facts of a case that defies rational explanation. Not through supernatural means, but through circumstances so disturbing that revelation was chosen against by those who knew the truth, who chose silence. Because stories like this one, the ones that history tried to bury, are not told anywhere else, I need you to subscribe to this channel right now before we continue with the story of Celia and the impossible pregnancy that terrified Charleston's medical establishment. Comment below what state or city you are listening from. I want to know how far these forgotten American mysteries reach. What made Celia's case so profoundly unsettling wasn't what people claimed to see, but what was documented in writing by the medical professionals. Measurements, dates, and physical impossibilities that no amount of ignorance or superstition could explain away. A city of contradictions was Charleston in the 1840s, where immense wealth existed alongside brutal subjugation, and refined society depended entirely on the labor of those it refused to acknowledge as fully human. With commerce, the port city hummed. Cotton, rice, and indigo flowed through its docks, making fortunes for the planter class, while every task that kept the machinery of prosperity turning was performed by enslaved people. During this era, the city's medical community had gained particular prominence, with several physicians publishing papers on tropical diseases, childbirth complications, and what they termed the peculiar physiological differences of enslaved populations. This was research conducted without consent, often in the most horrific circumstances. Northwest of Charleston proper, 12 miles, sat the Hartwell Plantation, a mid-sized operation of approximately 300 acres worked by 42 enslaved people. From his father in 1839, Edmund Hartwell had inherited the property, and unlike many of his contemporaries, he took an active interest in the daily management of his holdings. In childbirth in 1842, his wife Margaret had died, leaving him childless and increasingly bitter. The actual operations were run by the overseer, a transplanted Virginian named Thomas Gaines, with a notorious efficiency and cruelty that Edmund either ignored or tacitly approved. Approximately 20 years old when the events of this account began, Celia had been born on the Hartwell plantation in 1826. Records describe her as strong-built, capable in the fields and kitchen, both quiet in disposition. After Margaret Hartwell's death, she worked primarily in the main house, handling cooking and cleaning duties. From Gaines, several quarterly reports noted her satisfactory behavior and diligent work habits, the kind of bland observations that filled countless plantation ledgers, revealing nothing of the person beneath. Considerable skill was held by Samuel, a blacksmith who had been purchased from a Savannah estate sale in 1844, included among the other enslaved people on the Hartwell property. Also there was old Ruth, a woman in her 60s who served as an unofficial midwife and healer for the enslaved community. The kind of practical medical knowledge that came from decades of experience and necessity was possessed by Ruth, who had delivered more than 100 babies over her lifetime. Arranged in 2 rows behind the main house, the enslaved quarters consisted of 12 rough cabins, each housing multiple families in cramped, inadequate conditions. Several prominent physicians who would become relevant to Celia's story were included in Charleston's medical establishment in this period. For 15 years, Dr. William Saunders had practiced in the city, primarily serving wealthy white families, but occasionally called to attend to enslaved people when their value as property warranted medical intervention. Younger and more ambitious, Dr. James Pritchard had recently arrived from Philadelphia with newfangled ideas about obstetrics and had published 2 papers on maternal health. The eldest of the three, Dr. Henry Strickland, had practiced medicine for nearly 40 years and was known for his meticulous record-keeping and scientific approach. Normally, the winter of 1846 proceeded on the Hartwell plantation. The cotton had been picked and processed, the fields prepared for the next planting season, the endless cycle of labor continuing without pause. In the main house, Celia performed her duties, largely invisible to Edmund Hartwell except when he required something. Nothing unusual about her behavior or appearance during these months was noted by the other enslaved people. That Celia had shown no signs of illness or physical change throughout the entire winter would later be testified by old Ruth. Not until March of 1847 would circumstances transform Celia from an anonymous enslaved woman into the subject of medical documentation so disturbing that it would haunt Charleston's physicians for years to come. On the morning of March 18, 1847, while carrying firewood into the main house, Celia collapsed. Annoyed by the disruption to his breakfast routine, Edmund Hartwell sent for old Ruth to deal with the situation. Conscious but in obvious distress, Celia was found by Ruth, her abdomen rigid and distended, her breathing shallow. Something she had never done before was caused by what Ruth discovered during her examination. She refused to treat the patient and insisted that Edmund send for a white physician immediately. "I ain't touching this," Ruth reportedly told the other enslaved women who had gathered. "This ain't natural. This ain't right. A real doctor needs to be gotten by Mr. Hartwell." Irritated by what he perceived as Ruth's superstition but concerned about the potential loss of property, Edmund sent a rider to Charleston to fetch Dr. Saunders. A simple case of digestive distress or perhaps a miscarriage was expected by the physician when he arrived late that afternoon. Everything he thought he understood about human biology would be challenged by what he encountered instead. For disturbing reading, Dr. Saunders's initial examination notes, preserved in the Charleston Medical Society archives, make. He documented that Celia's abdomen was grossly distended, firm to palpation, with movement clearly visible beneath the abdominal wall. This suggested advanced pregnancy, except that absolutely no signs of pregnancy until that very morning had been shown by Celia, according to every witness, including Edmund Hartwell himself. No morning sickness, no enlargement of the breasts, no changes in appetite or behavior, no gradual expansion of the belly that would accompany normal gestation. No observable signs of gravidity at any point prior to this date were presented by the patient, Dr. Saunders wrote. Yet clear evidence of advanced pregnancy estimated at 7 to 8 months by abdominal measurements is revealed by examination. This is medically impossible. Without visible signs, a pregnancy cannot progress to such an advanced stage. Either through methods unknown to medical science, the patient has been concealing her condition, or a phenomenon entirely outside my experience is being witnessed by us. Additional examinations were performed by Dr. Saunders, bringing in Dr. Pritchard for a second opinion. The same impossibility was documented by both physicians. Celia appeared to be in the late stages of pregnancy, yet she had shown no symptoms whatsoever until that morning. Strong and clearly audible through a stethoscope was the fetal heartbeat. Vigorous and frequent was the movement within her abdomen. By every medical standard, she was carrying a healthy, nearly full-term child, one that had somehow developed without any of the normal indicators. Practical in matters of property, Edmund Hartwell asked the obvious question, when did this happen? Who is responsible? An even deeper mystery was revealed by the question. When questioned, Celia insisted she had been with no man. This was confirmed by old Ruth, stating that she would have known if any of the enslaved men had been involved with Celia. In the close quarters of plantation life, such things rarely remained secret. Any involvement was denied by Thomas Gaines, the overseer, who suggested that Celia was lying. In that manner, no interest in Celia had been taken by Edmund Hartwell himself, and his general avoidance of the enslaved women since his wife's death was confirmed by his household staff. "She says she ain't been with nobody," old Ruth told Dr. Saunders. "And I believe her. Something else is going on here, doctor." About when she might have conceived, Dr. Pritchard attempted to question Celia, walking her through the timeline. By his calculations, if she was indeed 7 to 8 months pregnant, conception would have occurred in late July or early August of 1846. That she had been with no one during that time or any time since was maintained by Celia. No visitors during that period were shown by the plantation records, no traveling salesmen or itinerant workers who might have had access to the quarters. Rapidly over the next 3 days, Celia's condition progressed. Her belly continued to expand at a rate that alarmed both physicians. From March 21, Dr. Saunders's notes record, the patient's abdomen has increased in circumference by 4 inches since initial examination 3 days prior. This rate of growth is unprecedented. The fetus remains active, heartbeat strong. Significant discomfort is being experienced by the patient but no labor contractions. Through any known medical framework, unable to explain observed phenomena. On March 22, Dr. Strickland joined the other physicians, and additional credibility to the documentation was lent by his presence. A man of science who trusted only what he could measure and observe, Strickland performed his own independent examination. Those of his colleagues were matched by his conclusions. Unquestionably pregnant with a healthy fetus was Celia. Yet rational explanation was defied by the timeline and progression. More than 1,000 births in my career have been attended by me, Dr. Strickland wrote in his personal journal. Anything approaching this case I have never witnessed. Either through methods I cannot fathom, this woman has deceived us all, or a biological impossibility we are observing. Though I cannot explain what mechanism might account for such rapid development, I am inclined toward the latter. To Charleston for more intensive observation, the physicians discussed removing Celia. But Edmund Hartwell refused, stating he would not have his property paraded through the city streets. At the plantation, the doctors agreed to remain, documenting the case with scientific rigor while waiting for labor to begin naturally. On the evening of March 23, into labor went Celia. What followed would cement this case in Charleston's medical history as something that should never have happened, and that could never be fully explained by anyone who witnessed it. 14 hours lasted the labor, beginning just after sunset and continuing through the night into the following morning. Dr. Saunders, Dr. Pritchard, and Dr. Strickland all attended, with old Ruth present to provide practical assistance. With unusual thoroughness, every stage of the process was documented by the physicians, perhaps sensing they were witnessing something that would require extensive evidence to be believed. A birth that proceeded normally in every respect save one is described in Dr. Pritchard's delivery notes, the size of the infant at the time of birth. A girl, the child weighed 11 pounds and measured 23 in length, substantially larger than average, but not impossibly so. Healthy and fully developed she appeared, crying vigorously upon delivery, showing no signs of distress or abnormality, but the timing remained inexplicable. 7 to 8 months had been the estimated pregnancy of Celia by the physicians 3 days earlier. Yet every sign of being full term was shown by the infant delivered, with a physical development typical of a 40-week gestation. Every principle of embryology was violated by the rapid progression from near-term to delivery, which suggested a developmental acceleration. Characteristics consistent with full gestational development are displayed by the infant, Dr. Strickland recorded. Fully formed lungs, vigorous cry, strong muscle tone, appropriate fat deposits beneath skin. Yet a pregnancy of approximately 32 weeks was indicated by our examination of the mother 5 days prior. Either dramatically incorrect was our initial assessment, which I cannot accept given 3 independent examinations, or at a rate incompatible with human biology, this child developed. Presented with a healthy enslaved infant girl who would eventually represent additional property value, no particular interest in the medical mystery was shown by Edmund Hartwell. As was his right, he named the child Dina, and instructed that to work duties, Celia should return as soon as she recovered. For him, satisfactorily the situation had resolved. He had suffered no property loss and had gained a future worker. But the matter could not be let rest by the physicians. At Dr. Strickland's Charleston office 3 days after the delivery, Dr. Saunders, Dr. Pritchard, and Dr. Strickland convened to review their documentation. They had measurements, dates, multiple independent examinations, all pointing to the same impossible conclusion. From showing no signs of pregnancy to delivering a full-term infant in less than a week had been progressed by Celia. That we were somehow deceived must be considered by us, Dr. Pritchard suggested during their meeting. Perhaps tightly throughout the pregnancy, the woman bound her abdomen, concealing her condition until she could no longer do so. Such practices are not unknown. His head was shaken by Dr. Strickland. I examined her clothing. There was no binding, no compression, and no binding could conceal a pregnancy so completely that absolutely no physical changes for 8 months were shown by her. The breasts alone would have enlarged significantly. Her gait would have altered. Beyond the abdominal region, she would have gained weight. Until the morning of March 18, she showed no signs whatsoever, swear every enslaved person on that plantation. Then what do you propose? Dr. Saunders asked. That in a matter of days, the child materialized inside her womb. That to completion in less than a week, human gestation can somehow accelerate? Our professional credibility would be destroyed by such a claim. In silence, the 3 men sat, confronting documentation that seemed irrefutable, yet described events that could not possibly have occurred. They had witnessed something that challenged the foundations of medical science, yet without inviting ridicule and professional destruction, they could not publish their findings. A proposal was made by Dr. Strickland. A sealed report to the Charleston Medical Society is submitted by us, documenting our observations without drawing conclusions. The facts as we recorded them are presented by us, the dates, the measurements, the multiple examinations. The impossibility of what we observed is acknowledged by us while maintaining that accurate is our documentation. With greater knowledge than we possess, future medical men may be able to explain what we cannot. To this compromise, the other physicians agreed. On April 3, 1847, their joint report was submitted by them to the Charleston Medical Society, accompanied by all their examination notes, measurements, and observations. 2 weeks later came the Society's response. The report would be accepted and sealed, but not published or distributed. For posterity, the case of Celia's impossible pregnancy would be preserved, but from public scrutiny hidden. Compelling the board finds the documentation, but for public dissemination, the implications too extraordinary, the Society's letter stated. If widely known, such a case would invite sensationalism and undermine public confidence in medical science. For potential future study, the report will be preserved in our archives. Though not without reservation, this decision was accepted by the physicians. In a letter to a colleague in Philadelphia, Dr. Pritchard wrote, "Something that defies explanation we have witnessed. Yet by professional necessity, we are bound to silence. Whether we observed a miracle, a deception beyond human capability, or a natural phenomenon so rare and unusual that science has yet to account for it, I cannot say. Only that I saw what I saw I know, and it should not have been possible." Of whispered speculation, a subject became Celia's mysterious pregnancy within the enslaved community at the Hartwell plantation. As a blessing, it was viewed by some, as something darker by others. Even after the successful delivery, her distance was maintained by old Ruth, who had refused to attend Celia during her initial collapse. "That child ain't right," Ruth told the other enslaved women. "Don't matter that she look healthy. Something wrong with how she came to be." Physically from the delivery within a few weeks, Celia herself recovered, but changes in her demeanor were noticed by those who knew her. Where she had previously been quiet and unremarkable, withdrawn and fearful she now seemed. With anyone, she refused to discuss the circumstances of her pregnancy, simply insisting she had been with no man, and knew nothing more than that. True to his word, Edmund Hartwell put Celia back to work in the main house. As was standard practice, the infant Denina was left in the care of other enslaved women during the day. For several months, into a new normal the situation appeared to stabilize, a mystery that had been witnessed, documented, and then deliberately buried. But far from over was Celia's story. Merely the first chapter of a mystery that would deepen and darken as the child grew would prove to be the impossible circumstances of Denina's conception and rapid development. By all observable standards, normally proceeded Denina's early development. She nursed vigorously, gained weight appropriately, and without incident reached typical infant milestones. Satisfied that his property had increased in value without complication, Edmund Hartwell paid little attention to either mother or child beyond ensuring they performed their assigned tasks. But troubling observations about the child began to be documented by old Ruth, whose decades of experience had taught her to recognize signs others might miss. Ruth couldn't read or write, but she had an exceptional memory, and she shared her concerns with Samuel, the blacksmith, who could write and secretly kept a journal hidden in his workshop. Decades later, among the papers of his descendants, Samuel's journal entries from late 1847 and early 1848 were discovered, providing disturbing details that the white physicians never knew. According to these entries, physical and cognitive development significantly ahead of normal patterns was demonstrated by Dinina. At 6 months, unsupported, she could sit and was attempting to pull herself to standing, milestones typically reached several months later. At 8 months, her first words were spoken by her, not the babbling approximations of infant speech, but clear, recognizable words. "The child ain't natural," Ruth says, Samuel wrote in October 1847. "She growing too fast, learning too quick," she says. Of something it remind her, but what she won't say. Of the baby, other women are scared, won't hardly look at her. Nothing is said by Celia, just her head down she keeps and her work she does. As exceptional but not impossible, the accelerated development, while unusual, might have been dismissed. Some children simply develop faster than others. But something more profoundly wrong was suggested by other observations recorded in Samuel's journal. "Like other babies, the child don't cry," Samuel wrote in December 1847. "A baby like that she never heard," Ruth says. "Wrong it sounds," she says. "Like something trying to sound like a baby but not quite right. At night, making sounds they hear the child," women say. "Sounds no baby should make." In February 1848, when Dinina was approximately 11 months old, an incident occurred that crystallized the enslaved community's fear into something approaching terror. With watching Dinina while Celia worked in the main house, a 15-year-old named Grace was tasked, one of the younger enslaved women. To old Ruth, Grace later reported that she had seen Dinina, who should barely have been walking, moving across the cabin floor with unnatural coordination, and that when directly at her the child had looked, such profound wrongness had been felt by Grace that she had screamed and run from the cabin. "And I seen something in her eyes, that child looked at me," Grace told Ruth, according to Samuel's journal. "Something that know things. Something that understand things no baby should understand. Again, near that child I ain't going." The enslaved workers' reluctance to interact with Dinina was noticed by Thomas Gaines, the overseer, and to ignorance and superstition he attributed it. To Edmund Hartwell, he reported that some foolish notion about Celia's child had been taken by the Negroes, but that it wasn't interfering with work productivity. With maintaining order and output concerned only, Edmund instructed Gaines to beat the superstition out of them if necessary, but otherwise ignore the matter. Increasingly isolated within the enslaved community had become Celia herself. When possible, the other women, who had previously included her in their conversations and shared tasks, now avoided. Their fear seemed to be understood by Celia, and no effort to combat it she made. With mechanical efficiency, she cared for Dinina, fulfilling the basic requirements of motherhood without the warmth and engagement typically seen between mother and child. "Like she's scared of it too, Celia treat that baby," Samuel recorded in March 1848. "When she have to, hold it, when she have to, feed it, but soon as she can put it down, she do. To it never sing like mothers do. With it never play. What she must just do and nothing more." In this state of uneasy stability, the situation might have continued indefinitely, with the enslaved community frightened but silent, and the white residents of the plantation blissfully unaware of any problem. But in April 1848, back into the open in a way that could not be ignored, circumstances would force the mystery. On medical business, Dr. Pritchard, who had been one of the attending physicians at Dinina's birth, happened to be visiting a neighboring plantation when he encountered Celia and the child outside the Hartwell property. Curious about how the infant from the impossible pregnancy had developed, he approached to conduct an informal examination. Profoundly, what he observed alarmed him. At just over 1 year old, Dinina displayed physical and cognitive development equivalent to a child of at least 2 years. With confident balance she walked, in short but complete sentences she spoke, and problem-solving abilities far beyond her chronological age she demonstrated. Moreover, in ways Dr. Pritchard couldn't quite articulate, her physical proportion seemed subtly wrong. The length of her limbs relative to her torso, the size of her head, the spacing of her features. At an extraordinary rate, the child is developing, Dr. Pritchard wrote in his personal journal that evening. If I had not attended her birth myself, if I did not have documentation of her date of delivery, I would estimate her age at 2 years minimum. This cannot be natural variation. Of the same accelerated development we observed in utero, this represents a continuation. What are we witnessing? What process drives this impossible growth? Dr. Saunders and Dr. Strickland were contacted by Dr. Pritchard, proposing they request permission from Edmund Hartwell to conduct a comprehensive medical examination of the child. Their curiosity rekindled, the other physicians agreed. With their request they approached Hartwell, framing it as an opportunity to document a medically significant case that might enhance Charleston's reputation for scientific inquiry. Flattered by the attention and curious about whether Denina's unusual development might increase her eventual value as property, permission for the examination was granted by Edmund. On April 28, 1848, to study the child who should not have existed, the 3 physicians returned to the Hartwell plantation. Intensifies the horror in Celia's story just when we thought we'd seen it all. If this account is giving you chills, with a friend who loves dark mysteries, share this video. To support our content, hit that like button, and to never miss stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. What happens next? Let's discover together. In the main house parlor, the examination took place with Edmund Hartwell observing and Celia standing silently in the corner, her face carefully empty of expression. Measuring instruments, developmental assessment tools, and detailed charts for recording their observations had been brought by the physicians. At 13 months old, Denina stood 32 in tall and weighed 28 pounds, measurements consistent with a healthy child of 24 to 30 months. To an age range of 2 to 2.5 years, her motor skills, language development, and cognitive abilities all tracked. Since birth, the acceleration of her development had not slowed, but had remained constant, as if at roughly twice the normal rate her internal clock ran. Most remarkable, Dr. Strickland murmured, noting her vocabulary and sentence structure. With clarity I would not expect until at least 24 months, the child speaks. Yet, she is barely past her first birthday. But toward unease began to shift the physicians' wonder as they continued their examination. Unusually sharp were noted by Dr. Pritchard to be Denina's reflexes. Almost preternaturally quick her responses to stimuli were. With an intensity and focus more typical of much older children, her eyes tracked movement. And in her gaze, there was something, a quality of attention and awareness that seemed unsettling in an infant. With purpose, she watches us, Dr. Saunders observed quietly. As if she is assessing. During the physical examination came the most disturbing observations. When Denina's throat and mouth were attempted to be examined by Dr. Strickland, with surprising strength away she pulled. When he persisted, directly at him she looked and with perfect clarity said, "No, that hurts." Glances were exchanged by the 3 physicians. Unremarkable was the statement itself. Many toddlers express reluctance during medical examinations. But a level of development far beyond even the accelerated timeline they had been documenting was suggested by the clarity, the intonation, the deliberate communication of complex concepts. "How old are you?" Dr. Pritchard asked the child, more as an experiment than expecting a meaningful response. For a long moment at him Denina looked, then said, "I don't know." "How old are you?" The question, with its implied understanding of age as a concept and its deliberate reversal of the inquiry, should have been beyond a child of 13 months. By what he perceived as precocious wit, Edmund Hartwell laughed, delighted. The physicians did not laugh. With increasing discomfort, in silence they completed their examination, recording measurements and observations. By every standard medical metric, the child was healthy, strong heartbeat, clear lungs, good muscle tone, appropriate weight for her height. But despite the apparent health, something profoundly wrong was suggested by the totality of what they were observing. As they prepared to leave, an unusual request was made by Dr. Strickland. "Mr. Hartwell, the mother as well I would like to examine, if you permit. That she is fully recovered from the delivery I want to ensure and for any lingering complications check." Waved his hand dismissively did Edmund. "As you wish." To attend to, I have business." The room he left, taking Dinina with him. Alone with Celia and the other physicians, the question that had been troubling all three of them was asked by Dr. Strickland. "What happened to you? The truth, please. Physicians we are. Whatever you tell us, the medical facts we need to know." For a long moment silent stood Celia, her hands clenched at her sides. When she finally spoke, so quiet her voice was that they had to lean forward to hear. "The truth before I told you. With no man I've been. How that child come to be inside me I don't know. Normal I was one day. Next day something there I could feel growing fast. Real fast. From the inside, like something eating me it hurt, bigger and bigger getting. Before that thing was born, I wanted to die." "As of that thing, you referred to your daughter," gently noted Dr. Pritchard. "Why?" "Because she ain't right," Celia said. And for the first time, through her careful facade cracked genuine emotion. "Her I birthed, but mine she ain't. From somewhere else she came. To get born, me she was using, my body she used, but my child she ain't. A mother supposed to love her baby I know, but when at her I look, wrong all I feel is like something wearing a baby's skin." Unsure how to respond to this confession, frozen stood the three physicians. Rationality was attempted by Dr. Saunders. With their infants, sometimes difficulty bonding is experienced by women, especially under circumstances of trauma. "Or ain't crazy I," interrupted Celia, her voice sharp. "What you're thinking I know. Poor slave woman don't know no better. Strange ideas got. But her you seen? Her you examined? Something ain't right, you know too. Your measurements and your numbers you got, but it too you can feel, can't you? That child ain't natural." The unease they had felt during the examination could not be denied by the physicians. His throat was cleared by Dr. Strickland. "Certain unusual aspects of the child's development we have documented. Her growth rate is unprecedented. But unusual is not the same as what I'm telling you," Celia said. And now in her voice was fear, raw and undisguised. "Things that child know? Things no baby should understand, she understand. And stronger she keep getting. At this rate, she keep growing. This fast, smarter she keep getting. In another year, what's she going to be? In 2 years? Something that for a child can pass, but one ain't." Before any of the physicians could respond, the parlor door opened and with Dinina toddling beside him, Edmund Hartwell returned. "With your examination are you finished?" he asked. "To attend to, I have work." Their instruments were gathered by the physicians and they departed, thanking Edmund for his cooperation. Until they were well clear of the plantation, none of them spoke as they rode back toward Charleston. "Of her own child, that woman is terrified," Dr. Pritchard said finally. "And after that examination, entirely irrational I cannot say her fear is." "Men of science we are," Dr. Strickland replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "For the child's accelerated development, a rational explanation there must be, some rare condition, perhaps genetic in nature, that we have not yet documented or understood." "And if there is not?" Dr. Saunders asked. "If outside the bounds of natural phenomena falls what we are observing, what then?" Unanswered in the air hung the question. A second sealed report was submitted by them to the Charleston Medical Society documenting Dinina's continued accelerated development and the disturbing aspects of their examination. Curt was the Society's response. "If possible, continue observation. Publicly, do not discuss case. Warranted further investigation, but difficult would prove further investigation." When a follow-up examination 3 months later was attempted to be scheduled by Dr. Pritchard, refused did Edmund Hartwell. "Healthy and valuable the child is," he wrote in response. "For continued medical intrusion, no need I see. Your documentation you have. Would that be satisfied?" To force the issue, no legal recourse had the physicians. Property were Dinina and Celia, and to deny access, every right had Edmund. Frustrated but powerless about the child's continued development from afar, they could only wonder. That conditions at the Hartwell plantation were deteriorating is revealed by Samuel's journal entries from this period. Rather than diminished as she grew, the enslaved community's fear of Dinina had intensified, as several workers requested reassignment to field duties specifically to avoid contact with Celia and the child. By what he viewed as irrational superstition, irritated, Thomas Gaines responded with increased brutality, using the whip more frequently to enforce compliance. Scared people, Samuel wrote in July 1848. Not just of the child, but of what might happen because of the child. Like something bad coming it feels. Something we can't see yet, but there we know it is. Like a storm building. To this place, death the child going to bring, Ruth says. Before she's seen it, she says. Long time ago when she was young. By that, what she mean won't she tell? In August 1848, 17 months old turned Dinina. To a child of 3.5 to 4 years, equivalent development was now displayed by her, according to Samuel's observations. In complex sentences she spoke, abstract concepts she understood, and problem-solving abilities that left the enslaved workers simultaneously amazed and disturbed she exhibited. Also begun had she exhibiting behaviors that an understanding of the plantation's social hierarchy and her place within it suggested, an awareness that for a child of her age seemed impossible. Property she knows she is, the child, Samuel recorded. What that means she knows. Like she's studying him, Mr. Hartwell she watches. Gaines too she watches. Like a child not really she acts. Like something pretending to be a child she acts, learning how to be human. On September 3, 1848, something happened that would transform the situation from mysterious to actively dangerous. After a dispute with Edmund Hartwell over plantation accounts, drunk and angry, Thomas Gaines encountered Celia in the main house kitchen. Only through Celia's later testimony and the observations of other enslaved workers who heard the commotion is what transpired documented. In his intoxicated state, advances towards Celia were made by Gaines that she rejected. By her refusal enraged and by alcohol emboldened, hard enough to knock her to the floor across the face he struck her. The assault had been witnessed by Dinina, who had been in the corner of the kitchen. According to multiple witnesses, what happened next for a child of 17 months should have been impossible. To where Gaines stood over her mother deliberately walked Dinina and in a voice clear and cold said, "You should not have done that." By the child's intervention startled, laughed Gaines. "What are you going to do about it, little pickaninny?" Up at him Dinina looked, and something in her eyes changed. Several witnesses later reported, a quality they could not adequately describe, but that with primal fear filled them. Again she did not speak, did not move, simply at the overseer stared with an intensity that was profoundly wrong in a child. Despite his drunkenness, unnerved, away from the child backed Gaines and left the kitchen. But consequences neither he nor anyone else could have anticipated would have the encounter. The next morning, in his cabin dead was found Thomas Gaines. Questions that neither medical examination nor investigation could satisfactorily answer would be raised by the circumstances of his death, and just how dangerous Celia's impossible child had become would be finally revealed. To the Hartwell plantation at dawn on September 4, 1848 was summoned Dr. Saunders to examine the body of Thomas Gaines. Shaken by the sudden death of his overseer, Edmund Hartwell wanted an official medical opinion for the record. What was found by Dr. Saunders defied easy explanation. In his bed lay Thomas Gaines, eyes open, mouth agape in what appeared to be an expression of terror. There were no visible wounds, no signs of violence, no indication of struggle. No evidence of intrusion or disturbance was shown by the cabin. By all appearances, simply in his sleep had died the man, except for the expression on his face and certain disturbing physical findings. Extreme rigor mortis far beyond what would be expected given the limited time since death, described Dr. Saunders's examination notes. To a degree I have not observed in 30 years of practice, the subject's muscles contracted. In an expression suggesting extreme fear or pain, fixed facial musculature. No visible cause of death determined. No wounds, no bruising, no signs of poisoning. Upon external examination, normal the heart appears. No fluid accumulation shown. Lungs. Without internal examination, cannot determine cause of death. Disturbed but pragmatic, Edmund Hartwell approved an autopsy. In the plantation's tool shed with Samuel assisting as directed, the procedure was performed by Dr. Saunders. Deeply troubled him what the physician discovered during the internal examination. No disease shows the subject's heart, documented Dr. Saunders. However, suddenly and completely as if all electrical impulses stopped simultaneously, the organ appears to have ceased function. With any pathology I recognize, this is not consistent. No blockages in coronary vessels, no structural abnormalities. Simply stopped the heart. Of death by natural causes, sudden cessation of heart function, cause unknown, was accepted the verdict of Dr. Saunders by Edmund Hartwell. In the plantation cemetery, Thomas Gaines was buried, and the process of hiring a new overseer was begun by Edmund. For him, closed was the matter. But better knew the enslaved community. About the confrontation in the kitchen they had heard. Denina's unnatural stillness they had seen, her cold voice heard. And now the man who had struck Celia was dead. For no apparent reason, his heart had stopped, his face frozen in terror. That child killed him, the other enslaved workers were told by old Ruth, no longer bothering to hide her conclusions. How don't know, don't understand it, but that child killed that man. Soon as Celia he hit, dead he was. Just yet, it didn't know it. Into certainty crystallized the fear that had been building among the enslaved population. Completely now they avoided Denina and Celia, refusing to work in the same areas, finding excuses to stay as far away as possible. Even further into herself seemed to retreat Celia herself, through her days moving like a ghost, caring for her daughter with mechanical efficiency while radiating a hopelessness that frightened those who saw it. The depth of the community's fear is revealed by Samuel's journal entries from this period. Where white folks can hear, out loud nobody will say it, but that child ain't natural we all know. That child can kill. Long things like this don't live, Ruth says. That what shouldn't be, a way to correct finds nature. But wrong if she is? What if that thing keep growing, stronger keep getting? What it going to be when like a woman it looked but with just a look, the power to kill got? To the enslaved workers' fears, oblivious remained Edmund Hartwell. To the same superstition he had always dismissed, attributing their avoidance of Celia and Denina, a new overseer was hired by him, a North Carolinian named William Fletcher, and to maintain discipline and productivity, him instructed. Practical and brutal in equal measure, Fletcher used the whip freely to ensure compliance. 2 months after Gaines's death, in early November 1848, at a Charleston social gathering, Edmund Hartwell was happened to be encountered by Dr. Pritchard. About the child from the medical case inquiring politely, Dr. Pritchard was surprised to hear that thriving and growing rapidly was Denina. About the child's continued accelerated development concerned, and curious about any potential complications, permission to conduct another examination was requested by him. Still grieving the loss of Margaret and childless, an almost proprietary pride in Denina's unusual nature had developed by Edmund. Remarkable child, he told Dr. Pritchard. Any white child I've seen, sharp as 2 years old nearly, but like a 4-year-old speaks. As a lady's maid or house servant in a few years, her good price she'll fetch. Yes, her you may examine. Next week by come. Dr. Pritchard, Dr. Saunders, and Dr. Strickland arrived at the Hartwell plantation on November 12, 1848. Now 20 months old, Denina they found displaying development equivalent to a child of 3½ to 4 years. 40 in tall she stood, weighed 38 pounds, and with grammatical precision and vocabulary that would be advanced even for her apparent developmental age she spoke. But her physical growth or linguistic ability was not what disturbed the physicians most. It was the quality of her awareness, the way with an analytical detachment more typical of an adult than a child she observed them, the way with perfect comprehension and deliberate precision their questions she answered, the way them she seemed to be studying even as her they studied. How do you feel? During the examination asked Dr. Strickland. Well I feel, replied Denina. Why do you ask? Unwell do I appear? The question structure, its embedded assumption and counter-inquiry, from a mind far beyond 20 months of age came. "Do you remember me?" asked Dr. Pritchard. "Several months ago, I examined." "I remember," Dinina said, and something in her tone suggested depths of memory and understanding that should have been impossible. "About me then curious you were." "Still curious but also frightened you are." "Why?" Before a response could be formulated by Dr. Pritchard, continued Dinina, "of things they do not understand, often frightened people are. Because you do not understand me are you frightened, or because beginning to understand you are and the understanding frightens you?" By the child's perceptiveness, unnerved, silent stood the three physicians. His throat was cleared by Dr. Saunders. "For your age, very intelligent you are." "Yes," simply agreed Dinina. "I am." In the statement, no pride was there. No childish boasting. Simply acknowledgement of fact. With growing unease, their examination they completed. Every measurement, every assessment confirmed the same impossible reality. At roughly twice the normal human rate with no sign of the acceleration slowing was developing this child. At her current trajectory, by her third birthday the physical development of a 6-year-old she would reach, an 8-year-old by her fourth. But the cognitive development was more disturbing than the physical acceleration. Dinina's intelligence, her awareness, her capacity for abstract thought and complex reasoning all suggested a mind developing even faster than her body. As she matured, what would such a mind be capable of? What would she become? After the examination, aside Edmund Hartwell was taken by Dr. Strickland. "Mr. Hartwell, candidly I must speak. Anything documented in medical literature is beyond this child's development. At a rate that concerns me deeply, her cognitive abilities are advancing. I would recommend—" "What?" interrupted Edmund. "That about an exceptionally intelligent slave child, concerned I be? Perplex me you do, doctor. Healthy the child is, well growing, and remarkably intelligent. Assets these are, not problems. As she matures, extraordinarily valuable she will be. Whether you fully appreciate, I question, sir." "That I have a rare and valuable property, I appreciate," sharply said Edmund. "Whatever medical curiosity she represents, my property still she is, and her worth only increase her unusual qualities. No problem here I see, doctor, only opportunity." With their documentation and their unease left the physicians, knowing they had no authority to intervene in what was legally a matter of property management. Their third sealed report was submitted by them to the Charleston Medical Society, including for the first time explicit concerns about the implications of Dinina's accelerated cognitive development. "A phenomenon without precedent we are observing," they wrote. "At extraordinary speed, a human mind developing within a body that at twice the normal rate ages. Far beyond her chronological age, reasoning abilities the child demonstrates with awareness and comprehension that approaches adult levels. As she continues to mature, what such a being will be capable of we cannot predict. Whether she will continue to follow human developmental patterns we cannot even predict, or whether eventually her growth will stabilize. Quite literally, something we do not understand and cannot control we are watching the emergence of." Immediate and decisive was the Charleston Medical Society's response. "Indefinitely, all documentation related to this case is to be sealed. For public knowledge, too extraordinary and potentially disturbing are the implications of the observed phenomena. To cease all examination and observation, the physicians involved are instructed. No further reports will be accepted. Closed this case is." Frustrated but bound by professional duty, the Society's directive was accepted by the three doctors. They had no choice. But what they had witnessed they would not forget, a child who should not exist, developing in ways that defied nature, stronger and more aware with each passing month growing. And in the sealed archives of the Charleston Medical Society, the documentation remained, measurements and dates that proved the impossible had happened, that from invisible to full term in less than a week a pregnancy had progressed, that at twice the natural rate a child was aging with a mind that even faster than her body developed, that something profoundly wrong had taken root in the body of an enslaved woman and toward an unknown and potentially terrifying maturity was growing. The only person who truly understood what she had birthed, Celia, continued her daily existence in quiet desperation. Because she had no choice, she cared for Dinina. But a mother who in constant fear of her own child lived was seen by those who watched her. To Dinina never she sang, with her never she played, affection never she showed. The minimum required task she performed and nothing more, as if catastrophe might invite any additional engagement. What she had been reluctant to speak aloud was finally revealed to Samuel by old Ruth, whose knowledge extended back decades, and whose understanding went beyond what she could articulate. "Something like this once before I seen," she confessed in December 1848. "Long time ago, when young I was, maybe 12 or 13 years, down in the deep south on a sugar plantation, a woman there was, and a child that weren't right she had. A child that grew too fast, knew too much, could do things that scared everybody. That child away, the master of that plantation tried to sell, but once they met it, nobody would buy it. So another way, the master tried to get rid of it." Troubled, her face, she paused. The woman, the mother, in the river herself and the child both she drowned. Said the only way to stop what was coming it was. Said her child really wasn't the child, that to get born, something else was using her body, and that to everyone, death it would bring if allowed to live it was. "What you saying?" asked Samuel, though already he knew. "That Celia's child ain't the first one like this, I'm saying," replied Ruth. "And what happened last time this happened?" "In death it ended. That woman knew. Knew her child had to die and that with it, she had to die. With what she'd done, couldn't live even if it was necessary." "Celia Gunner, you think?" "Already dead inside Celia I think," quietly said Ruth. "Just for her body to catch up with her soul, waiting." Over the Hartwell plantation settled the winter of 1848–49, and with it came a sense of approaching catastrophe that even Edmund Hartwell, insulated by his privilege and willful ignorance, could not entirely ignore. With the grim efficiency of people awaiting disaster, through their tasks moved the enslaved workers. Further into herself retreated Celia, a shadow of a person going through the motions of existence. And physically, mentally continued to grow Dinina, becoming something that nature had never intended to create. On a cold February night would arrive the end, when it came, and to some questions would provide answers while raising others that would never be resolved. On the night of February 23, 1849, to screaming woke the enslaved quarters of the Hartwell plantation. Multiple witnesses reported that in flames was engulfed Celia's cabin, with unnatural speed the fire spreading despite the cold and damp conditions. By the time help arrived, into burning rubble had collapsed the cabin. To prevent the fire from spreading to other structures, a bucket brigade was organized by William Fletcher, the overseer. Once the flames were controlled, the grim task of searching the ruins began. In the remains, 2 bodies were found by them, an adult and a child, both burned beyond individual recognition, but by size and location clearly identifiable. At dawn to examine the remains and provide an official medical opinion was summoned Dr. Saunders. 2 sets of human remains consistent with an adult female and a child of approximately 2 to 3 years of age describes finding his report, filed with local authorities and later sealed with his other documentation of the case. Extreme thermal damage was exhibited by both bodies. However, that the fire may not have been accidental are suggested by certain findings. According to multiple witnesses, from the inside had been found barred the cabin's door, not secured with a simple latch that normally closed it, but with furniture pushed against it, making escape impossible. Throughout the small space, the remains of oil lamps that had been deliberately broken and distributed were found by Dr. Saunders inside the ruins, suggesting with accelerants, intentionally set had been the fire. Most disturbingly, by a metal bracelet that had survived the flames, identified Celia's body was found in a position suggesting that when the fire started, lying down she had been, not attempting to escape. Beside her, similarly positioned was found the child's body. Before the flames consumed them, both appeared to have been dead or unconscious. Deliberate action is suggested by the evidence, carefully in his report wrote Dr. Saunders. The door appears to have been barricaded by the mother, accelerants distributed, and a fire that would ensure complete consumption of herself and her child initiated. From the remains, whether the child was alive or dead when the fire started cannot be determined. However, with normal behavior, inconsistent is the positioning which suggests that escape was not being attempted by the child. With the loss of valuable property confronted, an investigation into whether any of the other enslaved workers had been complicit in the deaths was demanded by Edmund Hartwell. Using the whip freely, brutal interrogations were conducted by Fletcher, but no evidence of conspiracy emerged. That when the fire started, sleeping they had been, and beyond the screaming that woke them, nothing new, they maintained the enslaved community. A different story is told by Samuel's journal entry from February 24, 1849, one he could never have shared with white authorities. What had to be done, Celia did, Ruth says. Knowing what her child was, she couldn't live, couldn't stand watching it get stronger and smarter, knowing that to all of us, eventually death it would bring. To save the rest of us, her own life and her child's life gave Celia, Ruth says. Brave Celia was, that it'd take a special kind of strength to do what she did, she says. If that true, I don't know. Now both gone they are, I just know, and like a dark cloud moved away, the fear that been hanging over this place for 2 years finally lifted, and again we can breathe. By Fletcher about whether she had known Celia planned to set the fire, questioned, old Ruth maintained her silence at first. When threatened with the whip, finally she spoke, carefully crafting her words to reveal nothing that could be proven while still conveying what she knew. In her mind, troubled was Celia, she said. Since that child was born, troubled had been. A burden like that, a woman who carry, straight she don't think. That ain't there, things she see. That can't be real, things she fear. In the night, confused maybe she got, in her confusion an oil lamp knocked over. That what probably happened, just a confused woman and a terrible accident. With this explanation that matched the evidence while avoiding implications of deliberate action, satisfied, Fletcher recorded the incident as accidental death caused by mental instability and negligent handling of fire. Against a dead woman, having no legal recourse, Edmund Hartwell accepted the verdict and moved on. Property he had lost, yes, but not enough to justify dwelling on the matter. Through newspaper reports of the deaths learned the 3 physicians, Saunders, Pritchard, and Strickland. To discuss the case's conclusion they met privately, each man struggling with his own interpretation of what they had witnessed and documented over the preceding 2 years. Perhaps for the best it is, quietly said Dr. Pritchard. Something that should not have been we were observing. Now ended it is. Ended is it, he asked Dr. Strickland. Or simply one instance of a phenomenon that may occur again have we seen? An impossible pregnancy and an accelerated development that defied all natural law we documented. If once it happened, again can it happen? His head was shaken by Dr. Saunders. No, we will never. Sealed is our documentation. As too extraordinary for credibility, our observations dismissed. Forgotten this case once the Charleston Medical Society has made clear, and perhaps right they are. Perhaps some knowledge is too dangerous to pursue. In March 1849, to leave Charleston began making plans all 3 physicians. At a Philadelphia hospital, a position was accepted by Dr. Pritchard. To his family's property in Virginia, moved Dr. Saunders, abandoning active practice. Entirely from medicine retired Dr. Strickland, spending his final years managing investments and avoiding all discussion of his medical career. About the case that had consumed them for 2 years, publicly ever spoke none of them. The mystery that had challenged everything they understood about human biology and development. In the Charleston Medical Society archives, gathering dust remained the sealed reports. Never investigated or verified were their extraordinary claims. Preserved but hidden were the measurements and dates and impossible observations, known only to a few medical men who to their graves took the secret. Until 1863 continued keeping his journal Samuel, when during the chaos of the Civil War he escaped and made his way north. Decades later, discovered his writings provide the only account of the case from the perspective of those who lived closest to it, the enslaved people who witnessed the fear and the mystery and the tragedy that by Edmund Hartwell was never fully understood. For another 15 years operated the Hartwell plantation until Edmund's death in 1864, just before to much of the South, destruction brought Sherman's march. Eventually sold, subdivided, and developed was the property. Unmarked, Forgotten is now the site of Celia's cabin, the place where, to prevent something she believed was evil, a mother killed herself and her child, its exact location to time and urban development lost. But the documentation remains, sealed in archives, telling a story that medical science could not explain then, and has never satisfactorily explained since. A pregnancy that from invisible to full term in less than a week progressed. A child who at twice the natural rate aged with a mind that even faster than her body developed. A mother so terrified of what she had birthed that over allowing it to reach maturity, death she chose. And 3 physicians who with scientific precision it all documented then from their own discoveries fled, unable to reconcile what they had witnessed with what they believed possible. Of some unknown medical condition was Celia's pregnancy the result, some rare genetic anomaly that accelerated development in ways science has yet to document. The product of trauma and mental illness was her fear of Dinina? Or something real that others missed did she perceive? Truly natural was Thomas Gaines's death despite its suspicious timing and disturbing circumstances? Deliberately her child and herself did Celia murder? Or truly an accident was the fire? As the official record states, with Celia in that February fire died the answers, and perhaps that is as it should be. Not because the truth is impossible to find, but because the truth would be impossible to accept, some mysteries resist resolution. About human biology, about the mysteries that can occur within a woman's body, how much we still do not understand shows us this case. About the limits of medical knowledge and the dangers of assuming we comprehend all that nature can produce it reminds us that between the cracks of our understanding, some phenomena fall, neither clearly natural nor clearly impossible. It reminds us of this story. What do you think? That everything was revealed, do you believe? That what she did, right to do, was Celia, or out of irrational fear, an innocent child was she destroying? With your theories, below leave your comment. If enjoyed this tale you have and more dark historical mysteries like this want, now subscribe, the notification bell hit, and with someone who loves stories that challenge everything we think we know about the past, this video share. In the next video, I'll see you where another forgotten chapter of American history that was deliberately buried we'll explore, and for good reason.